while the dead burned beside me, trembling with passionate pity at my blameless life and shaking its flame-like head.
The recitation of poetry is a romantic, time-honored art form that is celebrating a 10th anniversary at Burlington High School with the National Poetry Program, Poetry Out Loud.
I tell you, it has taken me all my life to arrive at the vision of gas lamps as angels.
BHS English Department Head Benjamin Lally spoke with B News about Burlington High School and the art of the spoken word.
In 1991, Dana Gioia published a collection of essays called Can Poetry Matter? In one of them, he gave 6 suggestions that address the problem of why don't people read poetry anymore? Why don't people know poems like they did 50, 100 years ago? One of the suggestions was a national high school competition where students are encouraged to memorize and recite poems. Fast forward about 12 years, and the NEA, which Dana Gioia was then a head of, received a large endowment of funds from out of the blue, basically. And part of that went toward creating Poetry Out Loud, a national competition with a large scholarship to the top poetry reciter in the nation. One thing that a lot of us have noticed, those of us especially who have been here since before we started doing this project, is that the students know poems better than they used to. We're much more focused on having a concrete poetry unit in a lot of our classes, where before it used to be a bit more scattershot. We would have a poem attached to a book here and there. We always like it when we have students who see a poem that's mentioned in a movie and their response is, wait, I know that.
And you're straightaway dangerous and handled with a chain.
B News asked about the criteria for poems selected by the students.
There's a set list, but the list is pretty large. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 you can select from. The national organization changes the list up every year and takes out some poems that students tended to do more so that people aren't just leaning on the same exact recitals every year. I have noticed there have been some times that there seems to be patterns in what they're adding. There was sort of a wave of more tongue-in-cheek humorous poems. There was at first more of an attention, I think, to classical, older style poems, but there hasn't been something that I think has been completely consistent about exactly what students always turn to.
That wild and witching lay.
The performances are judged on the accuracy, how well you actually get the words in the correct order. Normally in our school and in the state competitions, there's someone who's specifically just the accuracy judge, so they can just be focusing on the poem and not the performance. As far as the performance is concerned, there are 4 different categories of equal importance, equal weight in their scoring. That is evidence of understanding of the poem.
Control pandillaje sobre territorio bilingual, las novelas mexicanas mixing with radio rock and roll.
Is it clear that you know what your poem is trying to get across? Voice and articulation, are you speaking at a good rate, and are you able to be understood?
You might think of burning an extra to honor the memory of someone who never met her.
Physical presence, do you look comfortable on the stage? And appropriateness of dramatization, which means are you enhancing the performance through your use of emotion without having it turn into something that seems more like an acting audition?
And swear your heart is as a shrine that only holds her sway.
One thing that we were very concerned about when we started this competition was that it might end up feeling like it's something just for the drama students or just for students who have had a lot of experience on stage. And there is sometimes a correlation in comfort with students who have been in plays and musicals and who does well in Poetry Out Loud. But I think we've seen in the past 5 or 6 years, there's no sort of lock guarantee that that's going to make you succeed in this competition. And as a matter of fact, I think more often than not, we have students who win the competition here who haven't been in any of our plays or performances. So I think we've found that nice line between it's not an acting competition, it's a poetry recitation competition.
In the end, senior Angel Vargas was crowned the 2016 Burlington High School Poet Laureate.
Which means our champion this year representing Burlington at our state semifinals in Framingham, Massachusetts is Angel Vargas. Let's hear it.
Great job.
On behalf of all of Burlington High School, we'd like to present Angel Vargas with this year's laurel wreath.
And in waxing philosophic about the intricacies and attributes of poetry, the question remains, Why does poetry matter?
Why does poetry matter? I think it's because if you ask me, more than any other medium, any other written art forms, especially more than the novel, the play, I think it's the closest we get to accessing our sort of inner selves, our inner emotions. I think the reason why when at weddings people read poetry, the reason why at people's funerals they read a poem. When Kobe Bryant retired, he wrote a poem saying why he was retiring. I think it's because it's a way of reminding ourselves of how we really feel about things, and that we do have these emotions that we don't have on the surface every single day, but that we kind of share this common experience. I don't think you have that same sense of immediacy and the same sense of contact with a novel, with a movie, a TV show. But I think it matters because it reminds us of who we really are.
From the Burlington High School English Department, back to you in the studio.
I would say to Burlington, and the English department has been year in, year out really impressed with how well everybody has taken to this challenge. I know that it's something that for a lot of students really is a challenge and really is something that causes anxiety, but we're always very proud of how the students rise to that challenge. And as far as Poetry Out Loud as a general thing, I would like to think of it as a first step toward having a better awareness of how poetry can actually be part of our lives.